Do not trust the ones who returned. The town of Glenridge had always been quiet. Nestled between thick forests and rolling hills, life moved slowly. People knew each other, and strangers were rare. That is why the sudden return of the missing villagers shook the town to its core. It started on a foggy morning. The sun had barely risen when a faint sound of footsteps echoed along the cobblestone streets. At first, people thought it was the wind, or perhaps someone walking their dog early. But as the sound grew closer, heads began to poke out of windows. 3 figures emerged from the mist. Their clothes were tattered, and their faces were pale and gaunt. It had been 5 years since these villagers vanished without a trace. The town had mourned them, held vigils, and whispered about what could have happened. And now, here they were, walking back as if nothing had ever occurred. The first to speak was Mayor Thompson. His voice was shaky but authoritative. "It can't be, you're alive." The villagers nodded slowly, but there was something in their eyes that made him shiver. Their expressions were blank, their movements stiff, almost unnatural. Among the returned were Eliza, a young woman who had been just 16 when she disappeared, and her older brother, Daniel. The third was Mr. Hayes, a miner who had been known for his jovial nature but now seemed different. "I don't know where we were," Daniel said, his voice low, "but we're back now." People rushed to hug their loved ones, tears flowing freely. Mothers clutched their children, fathers shook hands with old friends. But not everyone felt relief. Some townsfolk whispered to each other, their eyes narrowed. "Something isn't right," they said. That evening, the town gathered for a meeting in the old community hall. Mayor Thompson wanted to hear from the returned villagers directly. He wanted answers. Eliza spoke first. "We don't remember much," she said, her voice soft. "There was darkness, and then, nothing. And then we woke up here, near the edge of the forest." Mr. Hayes added, "We were taken by something, but I don't know what. And now we're back. That's all I can say." Despite their words, unease grew. Some noticed that the returned villagers avoided certain topics. They didn't speak of their families while they were gone, didn't mention the forest or the hills. They only nodded politely and smiled when questioned, but it never felt like a real smile. That night, strange things began to happen in Glenridge. Pets went missing. Shadows moved in ways that didn't make sense. Some townspeople reported hearing whispers in the wind, words they couldn't quite understand, but that sounded eerily like the voices of the missing villagers. Sarah, a schoolteacher, noticed that Eliza's eyes glowed faintly in the dark. She tried to tell herself it was just the reflection of the moonlight, but the feeling of wrongness wouldn't leave her. Something about the ones who returned was not human, or at least, not entirely human anymore. By the 3rd day, fear started to replace joy. People who had once hugged the returned villagers now avoided them. Doors were locked, windows barred, and children were told not to wander outside. Rumors spread quickly. Some claimed the villagers were possessed. Others said they had been replaced by something other. Then, the first death occurred. Mr. Thompson, the baker, was found in his home, his body twisted in a way that no accident could explain. His face was frozen in terror, his eyes wide open as if he had seen something unimaginable. Panic gripped Glenridge. The mayor called another emergency meeting, but the returned villagers were nowhere to be found. By nightfall, every street was empty. Windows were shut tight. The town had learned a terrifying truth. The ones who returned were not to be trusted. And in the darkness, beyond the forests and the hills, they watched the morning after Mr. Thompson's death. Glenridge was eerily silent. Smoke still curled from the baker's chimney, but nobody dared approach his home. A few brave souls stood at the edge of the street, staring at the lifeless body, whispering prayers. Mayor Thompson called an urgent council meeting. The hall was crowded, but the air was tense and heavy. Fear had seeped into every corner of the town, and even the mayor's stern voice could not calm it. "We cannot ignore what is happening," he said. "These deaths, they are not accidents. Something is wrong with those who returned." The townspeople murmured, some nodding, others shaking their heads in disbelief. Nobody wanted to believe that their friends, their neighbors, could be dangerous. But the evidence was undeniable. Sarah, the schoolteacher, stood at the back of the room, trembling. She had watched Eliza the night before, hidden behind her curtains. The girl had been staring at the town as if calculating something. And those glowing eyes, she would never forget them. "We need to watch them," Sarah said quietly to a friend. "We need to know what they are planning." Her friend, Peter, a farmer, frowned. And if they know we're watching? What then? That evening, Peter, Sarah, and a small group of villagers gathered near the edge of the forest. They wanted to see if the returned villagers were up to something. At first, nothing happened. The mist rolled over the hills, and the forest was silent. Then movement. Shadows shifted among the trees. Daniel, Eliza's brother, appeared. He didn't walk toward the town. He moved strangely, gliding over the grass without sound. Behind him, Mr. Hayes followed, his head tilted unnaturally. "They're not human," Sarah whispered, her hand gripping Peter's arm. Peter swallowed hard. "We need proof, or we won't be believed." As if sensing them, the shadows paused. Eliza stepped forward, her face calm, almost serene. But her eyes, they were dark, empty, and alive with something unnatural. She smiled, a slow, chilling curve of the lips, and then she was gone, vanishing into the trees. The villagers ran back to town, panting and terrified. They tried to warn the others, but not everyone listened. Some believed the sightings were just tricks of fear, hallucinations caused by stress. That night, the whispers began. Low, almost inaudible voices drifted through the streets. People said they sounded like their loved ones calling them from the darkness. Some went outside to answer, and they never returned. Mayor Thompson realized the town was losing control. "We cannot wait," he said to the council. "We must confront them, find out what they are, and stop them before more people disappear." The next day, the mayor, Sarah, Peter, and a few brave men went into the forest. They followed faint trails of footprints that led deep into the mist. The air grew colder the deeper they went, and an unnatural silence surrounded them. Suddenly, they found signs of the returned villagers' presence. The ground was trampled, broken branches scattered, and in the dirt, strange symbols were carved, symbols no one in Glenridge had ever seen before. "They are preparing something," Sarah said, fear trembling in her voice. "Something terrible." Before anyone could answer, movement in the shadows startled them. Eliza appeared, followed by Daniel and Mr. Hayes. But they were different now. Their bodies twisted unnaturally, limbs moving in ways that were impossible. Their voices echoed in unison, low and hollow. "You should not have followed us." The group froze. Fear gripped them like ice. The forest seemed to close in around them, the mist thickening until it felt like they were trapped in a living wall. "We only want to understand," Peter shouted. "You will understand soon enough," Daniel said. His voice was calm but carried a terrible weight. "Soon enough, you will all understand what it means to return, and what it means to be replaced." With that, the shadows swallowed them, leaving the forest silent again. But the villagers who had gone in were not the same when they returned. Something had changed them, subtly, in ways they couldn't explain. Their eyes flickered unnaturally, and when they spoke, their voices sometimes carried an echo, like someone else was inside them. Back in the town, fear had turned to paranoia. Doors were locked, windows barred, and every shadow was watched. Nobody trusted anyone. And slowly, people began to realize the truth that Sarah had whispered from the beginning. The ones who returned were not the same. And in Glenridge, the warning became clear: do not trust the ones who returned. Glenridge had changed. The cheerful streets were now shadows of their former selves. People no longer greeted one another. Children stayed inside, and parents whispered warnings through locked doors. Fear had settled like a heavy fog over the town. Sarah couldn't sleep. Night after night, she saw the same visions, the returned villagers standing silently outside her window, their eyes glowing faintly, watching. She tried to warn Mayor Thompson, but he had grown quiet and cautious. Every word seemed weighed against the possibility of making the situation worse. Then it happened again. Another person vanished. This time, it was old Mrs. Callahan, the town librarian. Her disappearance was noticed immediately because her dog, a small terrier, was left behind, whining in circles. People searched the streets and alleys, but there was no trace of her. Rumors spread like wildfire. Some claimed the returned villagers were collecting souls. Others whispered that the people who disappeared were somehow chosen to join them. But nobody knew why, or what the consequences would be. Sarah and Peter decided to investigate on their own. They didn't trust anyone else, not the mayor, not the council, and certainly not the returned villagers. They believed the answer lay in the forest, where the shadows had first appeared. Late one night, they crept toward the edge of the trees, moving quietly through the mist. The air was colder than before, and the forest seemed alive, watching them, whispering their names in voices they recognized but couldn't place. Suddenly, a soft glow appeared between the trees. It was Eliza, standing alone, her face expressionless. Her eyes were black, reflecting the faint light of the moon. Sarah and Peter froze. "Eliza, we're not here to hurt you," Sarah whispered. Eliza's head tilted unnaturally. She smiled slowly, and the shadow around her seemed to ripple like water. "You shouldn't have come," she said, her voice both hers and someone else's at the same time. Before they could react, the forest shifted. Shapes moved in the mist. Daniel, Mr. Hayes, and other returned villagers who had not been seen since their arrival. Their movements were jerky, unnatural, like puppets controlled by invisible strings. "We are the ones who returned," Daniel said. "But we are not who we were. You cannot stop what has already begun." Peter tried to step forward, but a force seemed to hold him in place. Sarah reached for him, and together they watched in horror as the shadows enveloped the ground. From the mist, figures emerged, people who had disappeared days before, their faces blank, their eyes dark. "They are like them," Sarah whispered. Her stomach churned. The town's missing were no longer themselves. They were vessels, controlled or changed, their humanity stripped away. Suddenly, the mist surged forward, surrounding Sarah and Peter. A whisper filled their minds, a chorus of voices that were not entirely human. "Join us, or vanish." They screamed and ran, pushing through the thick fog. Behind them, the forest seemed endless, and the whispering followed, fading only when they broke free into the safety of the open road. When they returned to the town, they found it in chaos. More people were missing, doors smashed, windows shattered. Some of the returned villagers were seen walking openly through the streets, their blank expressions hiding the horror within. Mayor Thompson was pale, his hands shaking. We cannot fight them," he said. "We must leave, or we will all be gone." But leaving Glenridge was impossible. The mist from the forest had spread like a barrier. Those who tried to escape reported being pushed back, turning in circles until they returned to the town as if trapped in a nightmare. Sarah realized the terrible truth. The ones who returned were not merely victims. They were predators. They had been changed, altered by something in the forest, and now they were bringing others into their world, one by one. That night, as she sat by her window, she saw Eliza standing across the street. Their eyes met, and Sarah knew the warning she had feared would come true. The ones who returned would not stop. And nobody in Glenridge would be safe. By the fourth day, Glenridge was on the edge of collapse. Fear had turned to paranoia, and paranoia had turned to violence. Families no longer trusted one another. Even neighbors who had grown up together eyed each other suspiciously. Every returned villager was watched constantly, and every shadow was feared. Sarah and Peter knew they couldn't wait for the town to act. They decided to investigate the forest further, hoping to discover the source of the corruption. "We have to know what's happening," Peter said, his voice grim. "Or everyone here is doomed." At dusk, they slipped out quietly. The forest seemed to pulse around them, as if it were alive. The mist thickened, and the air grew cold, stinging their skin. Every sound, the rustling of leaves, the snapping of branches, felt amplified, unnatural, as though the forest itself was aware of their presence. Suddenly, they came across a clearing. In the center was a strange formation of stones, jagged and dark, arranged in a circle. Within the circle lay faint traces of ash and what looked like scorched earth. The ground seemed scorched as if by some unseen fire. They did this," Sarah whispered. "The returned villagers." Peter's eyes widened. "This isn't just a forest. It's a trap. A place where something changes people and brings them back." Before they could investigate further, movement in the shadows caught their attention. Figures appeared: Eliza, Daniel, Mr. Hayes, and others they hadn't seen before. Their faces were blank, their bodies moving with a jerky, unnatural rhythm. "You shouldn't be here," Daniel said. His voice was calm, but layered over it was a chorus of whispers, echoing from the mist. "The forest takes and gives back." Sarah stepped forward, trying to sound brave. "What do you want from us? Why did you come back?" Eliza tilted her head unnaturally. "We were given a second chance, but it wasn't ours to take. Something claimed us, and now it spreads." Peter noticed faint symbols carved into the bark of nearby trees, symbols glowing faintly in the mist. These markings, They are controlling them, he said. It's not just the villagers. It's the forest. Suddenly, the shadows shifted violently, and the mist surged around them. Sarah and Peter were pushed back, tumbling to the ground. The returned villagers circled the clearing, their eyes glowing faintly. And then, from the center of the stone circle, a shape emerged. It was tall, dark, and humanoid, but not human. Its skin shimmered like smoke, constantly shifting. The air around it hummed, vibrating with a low, terrifying sound. The creature spoke, though not with words anyone could understand. Its voice was a chorus, 100 voices led together. You interfered, it said. You watched. You doubted. You fear, and that fear feeds me. Sarah scrambled to her feet. What do you want? Why the villagers? They returned, the creature whispered, a sound that seemed to penetrate her very mind. And they brought with them the seed of their world. Now, it spreads. Soon, all will return or vanish. Peter realized the truth in horror. The villagers aren't just changed, they are carriers. They bring something back with them, something alive and hungry. The creature's eyes glowed brighter. The returned villagers knelt in the mist, their heads bowed as though worshipping it. But then, a faint light appeared from Sarah's pocket. A small vial of salt water she had brought for protection, passed down in old town lore. The creature hissed, recoiling from the light. They fear it, Sarah said. The salt, it can stop them. Peter nodded, gathering courage. We have to take it to the town. We have to warn everyone before more people are lost. As they ran back toward Glenridge, the forest seemed to fight them at every step. Branches grabbed at their clothes, mist formed shapes to block their path. The returned villagers appeared at intervals, their blank eyes following them. The whispers never stopped, repeating a single phrase in endless variations. Do not trust the ones who returned. By the time they reached the edge of town, dawn was breaking. The mist from the forest was receding, but the warning lingered in every shadow, every wind gust, and every glance. Sarah and Peter knew the town would never be the same. The ones who returned had brought something with them, something alive, something dangerous, something that could never be fully trusted. Mayor Thompson met them on the outskirts, pale and trembling. What did you see? Sarah held up the vial of salt water. Something is controlling them. Something in the forest. The returned villagers, they aren't safe. They bring back what claimed them. And if we don't act, Glenridge will be lost. The mayor swallowed hard. Then we have to fight it, before it's too late. But even as he spoke, a shadow moved across the rooftops. Someone, or something, was watching. And from the forest, a whisper drifted through the wind, chilling the blood of everyone who heard it. Do not trust the ones who returned. Glenridge had become a town on edge. Every shadow, every sudden sound, was met with fear. Families huddled in their homes, children whispered prayers, and the streets lay empty, save for the occasional patrol of terrified townsfolk. Sarah, Peter, and Mayor Thompson gathered the remaining villagers in the town hall. They had no plan, no magic beyond the vial of salt water Sarah carried, but they had determination, and a growing understanding of the danger that had claimed their friends. We can't just hide, Mayor Thompson said, his voice steady despite the fear in his eyes. If the ones who returned are bringing something with them, if the forest is spreading this, we need to fight back. We need to stop it before it consumes all of us. Peter held up the vial of salt water. This may be our only weapon. The creature in the forest, it recoils from salt. We can use it to drive them back, at least temporarily. Sarah shook her head. We can't just defend ourselves. We need to understand it. We need to know how it spreads, or we'll keep losing people. The town debated, fear clashing with courage. Finally, a group of volunteers agreed to venture toward the forest once more. They would carry salt, torches, and whatever courage they had left. That night, the forest loomed like a dark wall. The group moved quietly, but the mist seemed alive, curling around their legs, whispering, teasing, warning. Eliza appeared first, her eyes black, staring at them without emotion. Daniel and Mr. Hayes followed, circling the group like predators. You shouldn't have come, Daniel said, but this time, his voice wavered. Something inside him resisted, faintly, against the control of the creature. The townspeople formed a circle with their torches and began to sprinkle salt along the perimeter. The mist hissed, recoiling at the line. The returned villagers stumbled back, their bodies twitching as if in pain. From the center of the stone circle, the creature emerged once more. It was taller than before, its smoke-like form twisting in anger. The air vibrated with its unearthly voice, filling the minds of the townspeople with whispers of fear and despair. "You cannot stop what has begun," it said. "The seed has been planted, and it will spread." Sarah stepped forward, holding the vial high. "We don't know how to stop it completely," she shouted. "But we can fight it. We can save the ones who remain. You will not take this town." The creature recoiled, the whispers faltering. The returned villagers shrieked, some falling to the ground as though the salt burned them from the inside. A few of them hesitated, glancing around, a flicker of their former selves surfacing in their eyes. Peter joined Sarah, sprinkling salt around the edges of the clearing. The mist began to thin, the forest retreating as the humans' courage and the salt formed a protective barrier. Then came the unthinkable. Eliza broke through the line, moving toward the townspeople, her face a mask of emptiness. But as she stepped closer, a memory flashed in her eyes, her mother, crying when she disappeared. That memory ignited something within her. She stopped, shaking, confused. I don't want this," she whispered. "I don't want to hurt anyone." Daniel faltered as well, struggling against the creature's control. Mr. Hayes collapsed entirely, his body writhing before going still. The creature hissed in fury, its form flickering. It could not fully control them while the salt protected the humans. Sarah realized what they had to do. "We have to hold the line. Keep the salt strong. We can push them back." The townspeople, despite their fear, rallied. Torches blazed, salt sprinkled the ground, and the returned villagers screamed in agony and confusion as the forest's influence waned. One by one, they fell to their knees, struggling to regain control of themselves. Finally, with a final, shuddering scream, the creature recoiled and vanished into the forest. The mist lifted, the whispering faded, and the clearing grew silent, save for the ragged breathing of the exhausted townspeople. But the victory came at a cost. Some of the returned villagers were lost entirely, consumed by the forest's darkness. Others remained, changed but faintly human, their eyes haunted and wary. The town had survived, but Glenridge would never be the same. Sarah looked around at the survivors. Mayor Thompson, Peter, and a few others stood together, shaken but alive. "We've won, for now," she said quietly. Peter nodded. "But the forest isn't gone. And whatever that creature was, it may return." From the edge of the trees, a faint shadow flickered. Eliza, now more herself but exhausted and haunted, whispered, "Do not trust them, if they ever come back." And with that warning, Glenridge understood the truth. Survival didn't mean safety. The ones who returned carried something beyond their control. The forest, the creature, and the darkness within the returned villages were still out there, waiting. Do not trust the ones who returned. The sun rose over Glenridge the morning after the confrontation, but it brought little comfort. The town was quiet, almost too quiet, as if holding its breath. Smoke still drifted from chimneys, but fewer people stirred. Many homes remained empty, either abandoned or taken by those who had disappeared and returned. Sarah walked through the streets with Peter and Eliza. The town had survived, but its wounds were deep. Doors were boarded, windows cracked, and signs of struggle marked the paths where the townspeople had fled or fought. Some of the returned villagers had survived but were forever changed. Their eyes flickered with moments of memory, but the darkness inside them remained. "We pushed it back," Peter said, his voice quiet. "But the forest, the creature, it's still out there." Eliza nodded. "And it's patient. It waits for people to grow careless. It waits for fear to weaken you." Mayor Thompson had gathered the town council. "We survived last night," he said, his voice firm, though exhaustion shadowed his face. "But we cannot celebrate. This is only the beginning. We must protect ourselves, or Glenridge will never be safe again." Sarah suggested a plan. "We need to understand what happened, why the villagers returned, and what changed them. The creature, the forest, it didn't just take them. It altered them. If we can learn the rules, maybe we can stop it for good." The council hesitated. Many were too scared to act. Others argued it was too dangerous. But Sarah, Peter, and Eliza volunteered to return to the forest. They would try to uncover the source of the curse, hoping to prevent future tragedies. That evening, they entered the forest again. The mist had thickened, curling like living fingers around their legs. Faint whispers floated through the air, echoing the warnings they had heard before. Do not trust, the ones who returned. They followed the faint traces of the stone circle, now partially hidden under moss and roots. Eliza's knowledge of what had happened during her disappearance guided them. She could feel the remnants of the creature's influence lingering in the trees, in the soil, in the air. Finally, they discovered a hidden cavern beneath the largest tree at the heart of the forest. The entrance was dark, cold, and pulsating with an unnatural energy. The whispers grew louder here, almost deafening, echoing in their minds. Inside, they found markings on the walls, ancient symbols, similar to those they had seen outside the stone circle. But here, they were more detailed, depicting figures being taken by shadowy entities, returning changed. Among the carvings, Eliza recognized a familiar symbol, the very mark that had appeared on her wrist when she first returned 5 years ago. It's a cycle, she whispered, her voice trembling. They take, and they return. But the ones who return carry the forest with them. They bring the darkness to others. Peter ran his hands over the walls. Then the creature isn't just controlling them. It's using them. Every disappearance, every return, it spreads like a sickness, like a seed planted in the mind and body. Suddenly, the cavern trembled. A faint glow appeared deeper inside, revealing the creature itself. Its smoke-like body swirled in endless shapes, and its eyes burned with hunger. You returned, it hissed. You seek the truth. But some truths cannot be faced without paying the price. Sarah stepped forward, clutching her vial of salt water. We're not afraid of you. We'll stop this. We'll protect Glenridge. The creature laughed, a sound that echoed inside their minds. Protect them? They are mine. Every one who vanished, every one who returns, they belong to me. And soon, your town will belong as well. The whispers in the cavern rose into a deafening chorus. Shadows moved in the corners, flickering like broken figures. The team realized the fight was far from over. They had survived the forest's first assault, but the creature's influence reached deeper than they had imagined. Eliza looked at Sarah and Peter, her face pale. If we fail here, if we can't stop it, nothing in Glenridge will ever be safe. The ones who returned, they are only the beginning. From the darkness, a single whisper rose above all the others, clear and chilling. Do not trust the ones who returned, or you will become like them. The cavern went silent after that, but the warning hung in the air like a promise. Sarah realized something terrifying. The creature had planted more than fear. It had planted doubt, suspicion, and paranoia. And in a town already trembling with terror, that might be more dangerous than anything else, the town of Glenridge was no longer the same. Even after the battle in the forest, fear had settled permanently among the villagers. Those who had survived looked at one another with suspicion. Every glance, every gesture was measured. The lesson of the returned was etched into their minds. Do not trust the ones who returned. Sarah, Peter, and Eliza had returned from the cavern with new knowledge, but also a heavy burden. The creature had revealed its true nature. It was not simply a predator, not simply a spirit. It was a force that thrived on fear, on disappearance, and most terrifyingly, on the act of return. Every villager who came back carried part of its essence. And now, that essence was spreading among the survivors. I can feel it, Eliza whispered one night as they walked through the empty streets. Even those who didn't disappear, it touches them. Their fears, their doubts, it lives in their minds. Peter shivered. So even if we survive, even if the creature is gone for now, Glenridge will never be the same. And he was right. Over the next few days, strange things began to happen. Small objects moved on their own. Shadows shifted at the edge of vision. Whispers drifted through empty rooms, repeating phrases like a warning or a curse. Do not trust the ones who returned. One by one, villagers began acting strangely. Some became withdrawn, staring blankly at nothing. Others were overtaken by fits of rage, attacking friends and neighbors without reason. The line between the returned and the town's survivors blurred. Nobody knew who could be trusted. Then came the first major incident. A group of villagers gathered in the town square, whispering about what to do next. Suddenly, one of the survivors, Mr. Carver, a quiet man who had never left the town, collapsed in the middle of the square. His eyes were black, like those of the returned, and he began chanting the warnings in a low, hollow voice. They are coming. Do not trust. Panic spread like wildfire. People ran in every direction. some barricading themselves in homes, others fleeing toward the forest. But the forest seemed to pulse, alive and waiting. The whispers from the creature echoed across the town, binding fear into every heart. Sarah realized something horrifying. The cycle was not over. The creature's influence could skip generations. Anyone who had even interacted with the returned villagers was at risk. Every act of fear fed the darkness. "We have to act," she said to Peter and Eliza. "We can't just survive anymore. We have to stop it, completely." They decided to confront the remaining returned villagers. The plan was desperate. They would use the salt and the knowledge from the cavern to attempt a ritual that might sever the creature's control, freeing the town. As night fell, they moved through the streets, confronting those who had returned. Each encounter was horrifying. Some recognized Sarah and Eliza, but their eyes were vacant, their voices echoing with the creature's whispers. One by one, they marked the ground with symbols in ash and blood, unknowingly preparing for the creature's return. Eliza approached the center of the square, where the largest symbol had been drawn. She began chanting the phrases she had learned in the cavern. The air crackled with energy. Shadows shrieked and twisted as the returned villagers writhed, caught between themselves and the creature's will. The town held its breath. The wind carried the whispers. "Do not trust the ones who returned." Suddenly, a massive shadow erupted from the forest. The creature itself appeared, larger than ever, eyes blazing with hunger. But this time, Sarah and her friends were ready. Salt lines surrounded the square, and torches blazed, forming a barrier. The creature screamed, a sound that seemed to pierce the mind. The returned villagers howled, some collapsing as the creature's hold weakened. But not all were free. Some were consumed entirely, disappearing in a swirl of darkness. Eliza, tears streaming, chanted louder, "You do not control us. We are human." The creature shrieked and recoiled, retreating into the forest, but not vanishing completely. Its influence lingered, and a faint whisper drifted in the wind, the final chilling warning. "Do not trust the ones who returned, for some will always carry me." Glenridge survived that night, but the cost was enormous. Families were broken, villages were lost, and the town would forever carry the scars of what had returned. Sarah, Peter, and Eliza looked at one another, exhausted but alive. The creature had been driven back, but its warning remained clear. The cycle was not over. Any who returned could carry it again. And the whispers would never stop. From the shadows of the town, a faint glow appeared. One of the returned villagers, barely conscious, looked at them. A final warning hung in the air, chilling every heart. "Do not trust the ones who returned, or it will claim you too." The town of Glenridge lay in ruins. Streets were scarred, homes were empty, and the shadows of the returned villagers lingered like ghosts. Survivors moved quietly, avoiding eye contact, as if the darkness could seep from one person to another. Sarah, Peter, and Eliza walked through the town, exhausted but determined. They had survived the creature's assault, driven it back into the forest, and faced the horror of the returned villagers. Yet, the whispers never left them. Even in the bright light of day, they felt the faint echo of those chilling words. "Do not trust the ones who returned." The council tried to rebuild the town, but fear was a stubborn enemy. People refused to sleep in the houses where returned villagers had once lived. Families were fractured, neighbors suspicious of one another. Glenridge had survived physically, but its soul had been shaken. Eliza could no longer ignore the truth she carried in her heart. "We can't stay here forever," she said quietly to Sarah and Peter. "The forest, the creature, it's still out there. And someday, someone else will vanish. Someone else will return. And the cycle will continue." Peter nodded. "Then we do what we can. We warn them. We record everything, leave messages, and make sure everyone knows the warning." Sarah sighed. "But will they listen? After all this, who would believe us? Who would understand the danger of returning?" Even as she spoke, the wind rustled through the broken streets, carrying with it the faint sound of whispers. Not threatening, but persistent, reminding them that the creature's reach was far, and its patience endless. Days passed, and the town attempted to rebuild. Survivors buried the dead, tended to the injured, and tried to regain some sense of normalcy. But the memory of the returned villagers haunted them. Some had been freed from the creature's influence, but others remained lost entirely, their fates unknown. Sarah, Peter, and Eliza made a decision. They would leave Glenridge, traveling to warn other towns. They would tell the tale, leaving behind journals, symbols, and a single warning that mattered most. Do not trust the ones who returned. They are not always who they were. They carry the darkness within, and it will spread if ignored. As they prepared to leave, Eliza looked back at the town. The forest at the edge seemed quiet now, but she knew better. The shadows would wait, and the whispers would never stop. From the tree line, a faint glow appeared. One of the returned villagers, now partially human again, stood watching them. Their eyes flickered with memory and darkness, a reminder that the creature's influence was not gone, it was only dormant. Eliza shivered. Even if we leave, the warning must endure. We must make sure others understand what happened here, before it's too late. As they walked away from Glenridge, the wind carried the creature's lingering message, a chilling echo that would follow them wherever they went. Do not trust the ones who returned. And somewhere in the forest, the creature stirred, patient and eternal, waiting for the next cycle to begin. The town survived. The survivors left with knowledge and scars. But the warning remained clear, whispered into the hearts of all who dared to listen. Some things that return are better left forgotten.